Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, now in this video, I want to talk about something that I think is very important in our pop culture. Okay, and it is the phenomenon of both Jordan Peterson and Dr. Todd Grande. Okay, these are two very big, high-profile mental health professionals. They both have PhDs. They both are real influencers. They are very much influencers, and I will start off by saying that I don't totally dislike them. Okay, I actually like both of them. Okay, but let me be very careful. Okay, I think that from the point of view of NPD, and believe me, I'm not putting myself on their level. Those are smart people. Okay, Jordan Peterson is a pretty smart guy. I don't think he's super smart. I don't think he's as smart as he thinks he is. Okay, I don't think he sits on the level of like. Let me give a couple examples, like say Tennessee Williams. Okay, Tennessee Williams is somebody who knows the human soul. Okay, anybody that know Tennessee Williams, go check it out. Check out Tennessee Williams. That guy was messed up. He was a messed up person, but he lived the heart. Okay, and he really lived the heart of the world. He really experienced the world with his heart. He burned out and he had a lot of misery. But Tennessee Williams, I think, was one of the great hearts. You know, one of the definitions of genius is the heart, having a good heart, really processing things in the world. I think Tennessee Williams was a real witness, okay, in the realities of the 20th century. So anybody who wants to go look at any interviews or any of his work, you know, movies that were made based on his plays, I think Tennessee Williams is an amazing person, and I think Jordan Peterson, he kind of puts himself at the high. You know, he wants to go to the top of the he wants to go to the top of the skyscraper. You know, I think at a floor. I think he's trying to hit the floor in the elevator where Tennessee Williams and Henry Miller. Henry Miller's another one. People should really check that out. Those people really felt. They probably didn't have all the answers, but they went and processed the real material of the world. They really struggled with, you know, the real realities. You know, full spectrum reality. And Kurt Vonnegut, you know, Kurt Vonnegut. I think we underestimate sometimes the surprising where you find the I want to say like the greatest people, you know, Kurt Vonnegut, you know. And so I think Jordan Peterson, he gets on the elevator and he presses like the 87th floor, like he wants to go way up there. It's like, okay, you know, maybe you belong on the 70th floor, you know, which is still pretty high, but I think he pretends and presumes that he's at the very top of the skyscraper, and somehow he's so good at debating because he's so fucking disagreeable, and so kind of he's a little bit kind of how would you say, he's kind of like wily in his arguments, and he's very argumentative, and he likes to change the subject and just doesn't let himself get pinned because he likes to fucking win. You know, he's just a bully. I'm sorry, but you know, Jordan Peterson, he fights like a bully, and he's not a fair fighter. You know, he jumps subjects when he needs to stay on subject. Somebody proposes something and he kind of jumps and twists and kind of does his pirouettes and stuff because he doesn't like to fight fair. Um, and so you know, that has to be said. I mean, I still like him. Why? You know, I'll talk about why. Okay, I think Jordan Peterson does care. Okay, I think you cannot take that away from him. He cares, and I think he deeply wants to find answers. Okay, and so he's coming from a place where no bullshit. He wants the best for people. Okay, now that you have to give that to him. Okay, um, it's not his fault that he's kind of a pussy. You know, because people are pussies, and he may be a little bit of a pussy. I'm a pussy. Okay, I have the right to say that because I'm a pussy too. I'm probably more of a pussy than Jordan Peterson, but he is a pussy. Okay, he in another circumstance, in another situation, people would fucking destroy him. You know, but he doesn't hang out with, you know. And now it's funny because like he'll represent politically, he'll represent truck drivers and miners and stuff like that. But if he really had to truly cohabitate and coexist with rough people, he's a fucking pussy. You know, he's an intellectual bully, but he's not really the man he pretends to be. You know, because he's not. Okay, and so you know, but I still, you know, me being a pussy too, you know, and I'm a disgraceful pussy, you know, like, and people who are pussies probably should say they are. You know, it's not like it's not counter therapeutic to be kind of honest about that because it's not a game. It doesn't end the game for life. I can still live a life. It's just that, you know, I know what I am, you know, and Jordan Peterson is definitely But let's talk about the real. Let's lay the whole thing out. Um, basically, I will not take away from either Todd Grande or Jordan Peterson that they care probably more than I do. They have deep, deep care about the well-being of the human race. They really do care, and they really do want the best. I believe they really do have, in that sense, they have deep conscience and they deeply seeking the best. You know, so like you have to honor that. Because to not honor that is also to sort of ignore things that are deserving of real attention, and it's not fair to assess somebody without fully appreciating all their qualities, and that's kind of like what we're saying, in this series. I'm talking about dialectical health, dialectical processing. We really should strive. I hope to get as many dissonances on the table and just let them sit without making a rash assessment. You know? But there are some things I observed both with Jordan Peterson and with Todd Grande that I do think need to be talked about. Okay, so basically, let's get into the issues I have. Let's start with Jordan Peterson, and then I'll talk about Todd Grande. And again, these are two PhD level, very intelligent influencers in the world of psychology. So it's a pretty big deal. And they talk about things like even personality disorders, So they also talk about at least Todd Grande talks a lot about criminal justice. He does really talk about how much he believes in people being punished, for their crimes, and he's kind of rigid about that. And that's a problem, I think. So let's talk about it. All right, so Jordan Peterson, where do I start to see the problem? Okay, I should take away the talk about being a pussy, because that's kind of a cheap way of talking. I mean, I think poetically it's true, okay, but that's a cheap way of talking, okay. So like, let's talk for real. Let's let that. I said what I had to say, but let's talk, okay. I perceive Jordan Peterson to have kind of a frailty, okay, which is in the cluster B spectrum, okay. I don't know if he's diagnosable as cluster B, because I think a lot of people have spectrum issues that are on the cluster B, in that they're in that area. You know what I mean? So he could be subclinical, he could be just spectrum, but he has cluster B issues, because I think his frailty, his nervous frailty, okay, because he's kind of a nervous guy. I think his nervous frailty makes it really hard for Jordan Peterson to handle real dissonances. Okay, I think he has the preacher in him, and believe me, I can relate. Me talking about dialectics, do you think that means I'm good at dialectics? I hope everybody understands. I talk about dialectics, and I may act like I'm preaching, and I'm sorry. I apologize, because that's probably what I have in common with Jordan Peterson. Okay, but that doesn't mean that I'm good at it. I just talk about it. Okay, because I think it's important for my recovery, and I think it could also help other people. But um, I see that frailty in Jordan Peterson, in the sense that he talks a lot, he preaches a lot, and he puts things out there, and he puts things out there, but he doesn't really allow for a broad spectrum of dissonances. Okay, he really doesn't. Okay, because he wraps up big, global, massive, panoramic issues, and he just wraps them up with these really kind of trite, kind of facile ideological sort of capsules. You know what I mean? Like, everything boils down to just wake up and clean your room. It's like, is it that simple? I mean, he probably believes it is. He probably believes life is simpler than what we make it. And maybe there is some wisdom to that. Maybe life is a little simpler than what we make it. Okay, so I'll give him that. But I think he personally doesn't put enough of the contrasting and, just all the factors of a problem. And he doesn't really just let them sit there long enough to really get a more mature processing, where he's reconciling more different sides of the equation. So let me try to give an example. Like, I sympathize with Jordan Peterson, okay, on the issue of what was happening with, like, say, the laws for political correctness in Canada, where they were getting into the universities and really regulating, mandating how you're supposed to refer to people with their preferred pronouns. Okay, now let me start by saying I'm very sympathetic to anybody in the trans community. Okay, and so this is not about my feelings towards trans. Okay, but I can also understand why people would be uncomfortable that it would have to be mandated through regulation. Okay, why couldn't instead why couldn't the trans community come with exhortation and sort of maybe try to persuade people to be accepting of their pronouns? Why did it have to come through a regulatory imposition? You see what I'm saying? So, like, I was already in favor of trans and queer and all, because I consider myself queer too. I mean, it's so weird. Like, I'm not homosexual or even bisexual, but I think I'm queer in a weird way because I think I'm almost like I can relate to almost like the how would you say, like the Lewis Carroll, like, the Lewis Carroll and the Willy Wonka kind of queer. I think that's part of queer actually, because I've never felt myself to be like I've never felt myself to be like a how would you say, like a conventional person. Like, I'm so unconventional that it's almost like the Willy Wonka. You know what I mean? Like, kind of like a little off in the twilight zone. So that's a kind of a queer. So as far as I'm concerned, the sexual identity queer, to me, that's all part of the queer. So I've always identified with queer people, and I guess they have really more sympathies for me than I have towards Jordan Peterson, because he hasn't had to live the difficulties that a truly queer person would have to live. So I have more sympathy for the trans and the queer. Okay, but I also understand people's frustration that it has to come through mandated regulation. Okay, so I understand that. Okay, so so Jordan Peterson has a point. I mean, he's seeing something, which is, why does it come through mandate? Why does it come through regulation? So okay, but does that does that mean that there's no other weights to put on the scale? You know what I mean? Like, that is one factor, okay, but aren't there other factors? Like, okay, so let that factor be. It's imperfect, okay. Don't be so fussy about something being imperfect. It's imperfect, okay. They're asking through kind of a rude, imposition, okay. But are there not other factors, okay? Is it not difficult for a queer or a trans person to have difficulty having their way of presenting in the world be accepted in the world? Okay, does that not also deserve to be put on the scale? Okay, you don't have to come to a quick, easy, simple answer. It might be a messy answer. Okay, it might be a messy answer. It may be that Jordan Peterson has something to say about it, but it may be that there are other factors that also weigh, and that the final answer might come through maybe a messy process of just letting it be uncomfortable. Okay, I get the feeling that Jordan Peterson was too frail in his nervous system to allow all the different factors to just sit. Okay, and maybe he has some factor one issues, factor one psychopathy. He's not diagnosable. He's definitely subclinical. I don't think he has a personality disorder, but he may have some little elements of factor one psychopathy that sort of dissociate from his radar some of the other factors that deserve to be also on the table. Okay, maybe he has not dug in his soul or his radar because of his dissociation to find somewhere in his heart maybe a little more concern and a little more understanding for what it's like to be a queer or a trans person, and how difficult it is to have your identity accepted in the world. Maybe it's so far off his radar screen that he's just comfortably not even seeing it. You know what I mean? So I'd say, like Jordan Peterson, I'm not saying he has a personality disorder, but I think he has elements of factor one psychopathy, in the sense that he dissociates issues off the radar screen that deserve to be on the table. Okay. And I think he has a frail nervous system, which makes it hard for him to put different dissociating kind of dissonant, I'm sorry, different, he has a frailty that makes it hard for him to put different uh, dissonant proposals on the same table, put different concerns on the same table so that they can be processed over time through the organic dialectical process. Okay, so I think that it's kind of like a kind of impatience, intolerance, which is evident of a frailty, not a strength, a frailty. Okay, if he was stronger, he could put more on the table. He could be patient without coming with his flash opinions and trying to be so pompous, because he also likes to show off, and you can't avoid that. That's narcissistic. He likes to look good. He likes to look smart. And so that's narcissistic. So I'm not saying he has a narcissistic personality disorder. He doesn't have to. He could just have spectrum issues. But there is a vanity to him and an oversimplification, because his factor one psychopathic issues, not to make him a psychopath, but he has that quality where he sort of doesn't see, he's divorced, dissociated from maybe paying a little more attention to what it's like to be a trans or a queer person in this world and have difficulty having your identity accepted. And by the way, like in saying all this, I'm not saying that anybody is good or bad. Like I like trans people, I like queer people, but that doesn't mean I know that they're good people. I'm just saying, without deciding how good they are people and they have issues. Why not at least admit their difficulties and just put it on the table? You don't have to decide if they're good or bad. You don't have to decide if I'm good or bad. I might be the worst person in the world. Nobody has to decide anything. Just put it on the table, you know? And so I think that if I were, like, say, on a military board, and I was looking at Jordan Peterson as a candidate to be a military officer, especially if I was, say, on a board for, like, say, a rated position, like being, like, say, a candidate to be a pilot, to go into pilot training or something like that, I would disqualify him no problem for being too frail emotionally. I think he has emotional immaturity, frailty. He's not able to have a lot of solid competing dissonances sitting on the table, just sitting there, where he could be patient and just let them sit. Maybe be like other professors. Oh, they got a new regulation. Okay, what do I have to do? Frustrating. Just let it be. If he really has beliefs about changing it, why doesn't he just quietly go to the meetings of all the professors and maybe just put his ideas on the table and let the political process, go through its process? To maybe he wants to propose an amendment or maybe a comment about the legislation. Why did he have to go to full rebellion and full revolution? It's like, there's lots of sneaky little subtle ways that you can also be influential without being the big megaphone and showing off your smarty pants way of talking and stuff like that. You know, and of course now I'm a narcissistic person. Okay, even me doing these videos, there is a narcissistic element to what I'm doing and sounding, me with my opinions and talking. So I think anybody who goes and gives public opinions or tries to speak, anybody who takes any megaphone, there is a narcissistic process, wanting to be seen, and not maybe going through the quieter organic process of just how you deal with people close to you, the back channels, the meetings that nobody sees, just the politics that nobody doesn't get on any camera. You know what I'm saying? So, so I'm not saying that Jordan Peterson is diagnosable as a psychopath or as a narcissist, but he has narcissistic traits without a doubt. And he's very uncomfortable with being challenged, which is a narcissistic trait. Okay, so he's subclinical, I'm sure. Now, I think he may be clinical with his generalized anxiety disorder or his anxiety issues, because I think he was addicted to either clonazepam or one of the benzodiazepines. So I'm sure he's diagnosable as having an anxiety problem. That he probably is working on. I'm sure, and he probably has arousal issues, because I think because he avoids a lot of like dissonance and he goes to like these flash, comfortable, simplistic, very polarizing, sort of immature political opinions, where it's easy to have a strong opinion when you don't consider all the factors of an issue. He just takes all the right wing factors and all the kind of more masculine issues and just ignores everything else. Doesn't really weigh everything really, and he just comes up with these easy answers because he doesn't know how to load his scale with all the real true issues that are really in the really in the panorama. You know, so so I would say that. On top of having probably an anxiety problem, I think he probably gets a lot of gratification from coming to these very easy, very kind of like limited spectrum opinions, that have a lot of power. And so he probably gets a lot of gratification. And I'll bet you his arousal is really like this. And that probably aggravates, I think, or causes a challenge for his anxiety problems. So, so I'm not going to say he has a personality disorder, but I think he has spectrum issues. Okay, I think he's subclinical spectrum with some factor one psychopathy spectrum traits, and I think some narcissistic traits, like significant narcissistic traits. I mean, he's notably vain, notably petty, very argumentative, very disagreeable, very uncomfortable with being provoked and challenged, and I think he's unfair in the way he fights. So. To me, that's kind of I don't know that there's a characteristic in NPD for being unfair in fighting, but I think it's kind of like you can fit it in. You can see how it fits into the criteria for NPD. without him being an NPD. I think he's short of it. I just think he probably, again, I think he's probably more on the spectrum of anxiety disorder, but he has a very frail nervous system. And I think he's very uncomfortable handling dissonances and having a broader spectrum in developing his ideas. So what he does, he sets up a narrower spectrum of really the issues he really takes seriously, ignores other issues that deserve to be on the scale, and then he makes the really easy. It's easy to make a philosophical insight when you're not considering the whole panorama of the issues that deserve to be on the real table. So he kind of loads the table just with a few issues that he thinks are most important, and then he makes that easy philosophical insight. Um, and of course, like, it all comes from a place of caring, and I'm not saying it's bad to clean your room, okay? But I just think that he's not really putting all the things on the table, and I don't think he really represents, I don't think Jordan Peter represents a philosophy of maybe being uncomfortable in the fullest sense, okay? That if you want to have the fullest heart, you have to be a little bit uncomfortable in life by allowing a lot of incompatible dissonances to sit on the table. Okay, because when you let things sit on the table, incompatibles, our heart will metabolize them organically, and through time, only through time and patience, we may later come up with insights that are more integrated than we could ever imagine if we just gave it a chance to just sit there uncomfortably. It's not to say we sit there eternally in discomfort. It's just that by allowing a certain low grade discomfort in our life to allow more dissonances and not to dissociate issues, okay? And if things are already off the radar screen, to bring them into the radar screen. Maybe I'm not naturally concerned so much about, you know, I don't know, like, I'm not so concerned about right wing fundamentalist Christians and their issues about who's going to go into the bathroom, whether a trans person's going to go into the boys' bathroom or the girls' bathroom, or whether, like, I'm not really so concerned about what's going to happen if a trans female decides to play sports with females, with cis females. Like, but maybe I should bring those into my radar screen, because we all should try to notice that our radar screen has a certain range of things that we care about, but look outside the screen to bring things in that maybe we don't care about, but that doesn't mean they're not important. Okay. So I think Jordan Peterson just assumes that because things don't show up on his radar screen, he just somehow can't imagine that they do deserve to be put on the scale and weighed, and not decided in 1 hour or 10 minutes, but just let it be and let time process those things so that you can have a more organic, sort of integrated, sort of reconciliation of issues. Okay. And so I just think Jordan Peterson, in a sense, is a very polarized person, because I think dialectically he's very degraded. Okay. And I think his dialectic is very degraded, and I think he just ends up with very polarizing, very easy, I think, philosophical positions that don't really have that full maturity of a more robust and a really a stronger dialectical process. Okay. So then Todd Grande, why would I mix those two together? Okay. Well, again, I think Todd Grande really cares about people. Okay. I think he comes from a place of earnest caring. I think he really cares about people being healthy. Okay. And I think he cares about the problem of people with personality disorders. I think he really cares about it. I think he even believes that people with personality disorders can seek improvement. I think he believes all those things, and I think those are very respectable things. But I also noticed that Todd Grande has kind of a dogmatic, kind of a hammering, kind of a stubborn, kind of a very limited, sort of a rigid position on personality disorders. Narcissism, narcissism, narcissism. Kind of, to me, that's a tell. Okay, and I think that the less human you regard people with narcissistic issues, I think is a narcissistic issue. Okay, so when people kind of have an unconscious way of sort of describing narcissism in kind of derisive terms, a little bit derisive, a little bit kind of dismissive, kind of putting them down, sort of taking them down from the normal status of humanity, kind of a little bit dehumanizing. I think when that's very persistent, okay, I think that itself is a narcissistic issue. Okay. I think it is a kind of intolerance, and it's kind of also like Jordan Peterson. It's an inability to let uncomfortable things just sit on the table, you know. And if you can't see the narcissistic processes as human, it's because that's also a kind of dissociation and not letting them sit on the table to be uncomfortable. Okay, And so the other thing too is the most telling thing for me with Dr. Grande is how kind of like he's kind of ruthless. He's kind of ruthless in his very stubborn confidence that when someone's guilty of a certain crime, they deserve these long prison sentences. It's kind of like automatic for him. He doesn't really weigh even like a court, even courts. If you're guilty of second degree murder, you might only get 8 years penitentiary. And why would that be? Because the court is actually going to weigh all the different factors, the individual factors of the person, and really just get into, trying to arrive at a truly fair sentence that really represents what the person deserves and what's going to help them in their rehabilitation, you know. And so what I see with Todd Grande is that whenever he's analyzing like a true crime case, even cases that have some borderline issues, like say a case where a woman, a very young woman, very young, okay, had a denial of pregnancy, okay, like a psychologically denied her pregnancy because she had issues in her family, and so in the anguish of not wanting to accept it, she ended up killing. She ended up delivering in a bathroom in the hospital and having the kid, putting the kid in a garbage can, and the kid died. Now, I agree. I agree with Dr. Grande that that's an intentional murder. Okay, but I think there are a lot of circumstances that I'm not sure I would call that. I don't think I would call that in the law necessarily what I call that first degree murder. Okay, yes, it has intention. Okay, but there's so many psychological factors that I think the heat of passion and just the degraded, how do you say it, the degraded capacity, because that person was under a serious, serious psychological pressure with her parents, her family, and her own denial processes, that I don't think she had her full spectrum of executive awareness to really, really make that cold, calculated decision. I think she was in the struggle of her psychological issues. Okay, so it's terrible what she did. Okay, but I don't know if that's really first degree murder. And even if it were first degree murder, even if the law says she deserves a very long penalty, I think those psychological considerations, I think, deserve to be also put on the table. And I don't think we should be so callous. And I think Dr. Todd Grande is callous when he so simply processes guilt and processes what people deserve. Okay. And the other thing Todd Grande doesn't do, and this may be a little factor one psychopathic trait, and again, subclinical. Okay, just like Jordan Peterson, Todd Grande is not a personality disorder. Okay, he's healthier than I am. Okay, I'm a personality disorder. Todd Grande is subclinical, but he has some little narcissistic issues. He's not as narcissistic as Jordan Peterson. Okay, but he has a little bit of factor one psychopathy where he's a little bit insensitive and callous to issues that deserve to also be on the table. So it's not so cut and dried and not so stubborn how deserving people are of penalty in the criminal justice system. Okay. And then finally, I never see Todd Grande giving a full weight. He may give a little bit, but he doesn't give a full weight, okay, to the fact that prison in the United States is not really a fully healthy punishment system. Okay, it is just punishment. There are programs in the prisons in the United States that do allow for some rehabilitation, but fundamentally, there are so many toxicities, so much toxic about what it means to go to prison in the United States that we can't just casually say, "Oh, it's good. He deserves to be in prison for 15 years." It has to also be on the table to any fair-minded person who works in mental health, okay, and who has a PhD and is a mental health expert, okay, you can never take it off the table, the toxicity of the environment of prison when you're balancing all the factors of what a person deserves. Okay, you can't casually say and then sleep well at night, just casually, quickly, just saying, "Yep, first degree murder, he deserves 25 years." It's like you have to weigh and you have to suffer and struggle with some of the other issues of what it means to be in prison in the United States. You know, that to me would show a little more weighing. And so I think that both Todd Grande and Peterson, they have the similarity that they have a little bit degraded dialectical processing. Their dialectical processing is not rich, rich, rich. It's limited. And I think that puts them in the spectrum, and they have something in common with us cluster B people, subclinical, but they do have something in common with us because they do have that degraded full dialectical processing. So that's my analysis of Todd Grande and Jordan Peterson, two big, major PhD mental health influencers in this world, coming from a person who does not have a PhD, but I'm just a cluster B person observing them. So thanks for watching.